Hello and welcome to Talking Bottom. I'm Paul Tanter.
I'm Ange Pearson.
And I'm Matt Brooks.
And we are thrilled to be joined today by a very special guest. He's a writer of both fiction and non-fiction with over a dozen books under his belt and a vocal supporter of clean energy who's been way ahead of the curve when it comes to advocating for electric cars. As a comedian, he was part of the rise of the alternative comedy scene in the theatre group The Joeys. And as a presenter, he made scrapyards cool on Scrap Heap Challenge and science and engineering accessible in Hollywood Science and How Do They Do It. We owe him a huge thanks for his brilliant web series Carpool, which has not only entertained us, but informed more than a few of our questions in previous interviews on this podcast. As an actor, his television work includes The Corner House, which he also wrote, A Christmas Carol, KYTV, the pilot for Not the 9 O'Clock News, Colin's Sandwich, Birds of a Feather, and of course, over 30 years wearing a rubber mask and sorting through Lister's fetid underpants as a universe's favourite Series 4000 mechanoid, Kryten, in the epic BBC sitcom Red Dwarf. But our listeners will recognise him, not least because for once he wasn't under a mask, for his turn as a one-legged Falklands veteran who quite literally smashes Richie's face in the bottom episode Parade. Robert Llewellyn, thank you for being here. It's an absolute honour to have you talking bottom with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And your introduction, I suddenly started remembering things I have done. I went, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Birds of a Feather. Yeah. Birds of a Feather. I'd totally forgotten about Birds of a Feather. I played a Tory MP in Birds of a Feather. I've forgotten
no.
Yeah, shocking.
Well, they're the good. Yeah, they're the bastards to play, aren't they? They're more fun. Well, we'd like to begin, Robert, by asking how you did get into acting in the first place.
I mean, it's a cliche in a way to say that, but it was just that once I did a talk at RADA at the drama school in London, because a friend of mine still works there occasionally. And it was, and it was to give a talk to the graduating students about working in television. So they got people in from different fields and, proper actors. They should be, because they're proper actors that train there. I'm definitely not. So my explanation of how I got into showbiz was I went round the back of the building that's called showbiz to have a cigarette, leant against a door, and they'd forgotten to lock it and I fell in. That's about what it feels like, because I definitely wasn't on that path. Like at school, at the school play that was done when I was there, I helped paint the set. I definitely didn't act in it. I had no interest in acting in it, and didn't know. Even my peer group weren't sort of actors. It was, and they were. And I remember the kids who were really into acting, and I wasn't in their circle. Right. So it was definitely a very peculiar thing. But I definitely wanted to write, and so that's how I got into it. So I wrote sketches for two comedians that I knew who did a double act, and that developed slowly into, they said, well, can you do this part? Because I'd write for more than two people, and I don't think it was a conscious thing. It's just the way it was structured, and I had to do it, and that was the most terrifying. Still, I think the most terrifying night, which doesn't involve physical danger, which I then experienced later at doing weird TV shows, but really frightening, vomit-inducing anxiety about going on a stage. I'd never done it. Maybe I think I might have been in the school Christmas play at primary school, as one of the kings or something. I can't remember, but nothing like this. And thankfully, that night, people laughed. That would have been about 1980. And enough people laughed that you sort of thought, oh, maybe I can, I don't know. I mean, it was a huge turning point in my life. It was a tiny event. It was probably 90 people in the audience. It wasn't a big theatre or anything. It was just a little pub room in East London. And that was sort of transformative. And then I think within 6 months, I was then performing full time.
Hooked. And was that how your cabaret group, the Joeys, were formed?
Yeah. So those two guys, we then with a musician, we then formed. It was a four-man operation, the Joeys, which lasted for about 5 years and became very successful, considering we really didn't do television. The only TV shows we did we did Newsnight. We were interviewed on Newsnight by Joan Bakewell. That was quite extraordinary, and a few other kind of tiny bits of TV, but there's very, very little, because we didn't want to be on telly. That was the whole point. We just thought TV's like bourgeois. So stupid.
Of course. And you were of course co-writing and performing the material then for the Joeys. There were a lot of political and social messages as part of your work. I was watching the Men Rap. Just in researching, and it's a real comment on what people would now call toxic masculinity.
Which didn't that term didn't.
To you, or it was important to you to have something to say while getting the laughter.
Yes, absolutely. Much more important in a sense than anything else. I mean, I think the thing was at that time, I think it was that I was exposed to pretty hardline feminism, as in through the women I knew, at a fairly formative age, when I was a late teenager. So I would have been a classic, unthinking, reactionary, sexist male by today's standards. I would have been a bubbling stew of toxic masculinity. And then I met a lot of feminists. I lived in a squat in London with 4 women three of whom were directly involved with setting up the first rape crisis centre in the UK. It was an American concept that they imported, and they were law students. Still know a couple of them, and they were, to put it bluntly, terrifying to a young man who was, tentatively heterosexual. A lot of people thought I was gay, and I realised that was quite a good thing to trade on because it made you less dangerous. So I didn't really dissuade that, but basically I am horrifyingly heterosexual, and I just love I love the company of gay men socially. I don't know how rude we can be, but a very good gay friend of mine said, "You love cock, darling, but only one, your own." It's really solved all my issues. But, I wonder if I am gay, really. No, you're not, mate. You're not interested in anyone else's, just your own. But I think men go through, certainly at that stage, so this was in the mid 1970s, very different era. But I think you would go through the thing where you would react to those criticisms that you got from women by going, "Oh, they're just lesbians that hate men. They're men haters. They're all bitches. I hate them." Or, which is what I went, like, sit on my own in my room after I'd had my ear chewed off, going, "Oh, shit, they're right." And that was the difference. And that took a lot of, it was a really difficult thing, because if you met a woman that you liked and you fancied, and she basically thought you were an arsehole rapist, it was quite difficult to form a gentle, equal, balanced relationship. And there were a lot of, I'm sure it's happening now, and it will be, and I'm just not aware of it. But, I remember making tea for about 20 women who came round to a women's group, and I had to leave the house, but I was allowed to make them tea when they arrived. And about 10 of those lived in a separatist feminist commune. They had nothing to do with men in any way at all. And it was a real radical offshoot of radical feminism. And I thought they were amazing. And one of those women was drop dead stunning, and I was just drooling all over her and made her a cup of tea. "Here's a cup of tea. I love you. Don't hate me. I'm not a rapist." It was a really extraordinary balance of trying to be politically correct by today's terms, and also still fancying the women who you shouldn't even look at. Even looking at them was
a formative experience, I think, is obviously you grow.
So it did have a big, that did have, and it was just a kind of, we were trying to find a way to express the idea of being men, but not being sex. So it was like being non-sexist men. And it was such a contradiction in terms and such a minefield, but it was quite good fun. So we did sketches about 2 wrestlers who would wrestle with ideas, not physical contact. So, and who would be more politically correct than the other. So they do each other's heads in, being like, "Well, of course, I was aware that there are homosexuals in the world, and I don't judge them like you do." It was all about one-upping, which we had experienced in men's groups, that men are competitive about being non-competitive.
Yeah. Well, people call it virtue signaling now.
Virtue signaling now, which is a deeply offensive term, but I've tried to turn it against the people who virtue signal. Or accuse me of virtue signaling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we should all be able to have a good discussion, I think. Is the
I think it's
the main thing. And I know from your carpool with Aid Edmondson, you obviously talked about it, and it was just a great summary when Aid just said, "It's ironic, you cunt." The sexism in Bottom is ironic.
Yes, it is. I mean, there were times when I went, that's close to the line, when the woman from the battered women's refuge came up to collect money, and he punched her and stole the money. I was impressed with how far they were prepared to push it. I mean, and I think particularly because of living with those women back in the 70s, who were effectively running a battered women's refuge or a rape crisis centre. You go, "Oh no, okay," but hats off to them, because it was an extraordinary. I can't remember any other, I'll say this right now, any other TV series that I've watched where I've had to walk out of the room because I can't breathe properly because I'm having like a panic attack from laughing so much. And that was then when Aid was pulling the nose hair out of Rick's nose with the pliers in the bathroom. The most pathetically stupid slapstick nonsense comedy, just cracked me up. I couldn't breathe properly.
It's amazing physical comedy, isn't it? Yeah.
Incredible. And I mean, that was, you asked, because I did come across them long before Bottom. I mean, before the young ones initially. Certainly Rick, I remember very clearly. But
well, so just to talk about the days of alternative comedy, before you were a performer, do you recall your first experience of seeing what we would now call alternative comedy? Was there a sort of formative thing where you saw someone on stage and thought, I could do that, or this is a big thing?
Bizarrely, no, I think is the answer, because I went to the theatre quite a lot. So, for instance, my mother was very arty and oppressed for her generation and quite angry. Grew up in a sort of 50s extremely sexist culture and was a bright woman who was very frustrated by the world and men in particular. And so I went to the theatre a lot with her. So I'd seen quite a lot of live theatre. I loved watching it. It had no appeal. I did not want to wear tights and remember lines or anything like that. It was just not. But I enjoyed watching it. And then I don't want to go over the whole story, but I left school. Yeah, I was potentially an academic kid who went off the rails in my teens. I think testosterone kicked the hell out of me academically. So I was at a grammar school doing quite well, and then it really went wrong. And eventually I was expelled from school just when I was just 16 and went off to make my way in the world. So very early, left home very young. And I became a shoemaker. So it's a long story, don't need to go into it, but I became an apprentice shoemaker with the Bespoke Shoemakers in London. And so it had nothing to do with theatre or performing. So I would have gone to movies. I loved going to the movies. I went to the theatre quite a lot, but nothing. I don't think I even was aware, because comedians to me meant Benny Hill, Les Dennis. I don't know. It meant people, often men in ruffle-fronted shirts making sexist and racist jokes.
The comedian's show.
Yeah. So I knew that, and some of them made me laugh. It wasn't. And Morecambe and Wise. I loved them, and that wasn't that. I found them all loathsome. Frankie Howard. I remember loving Frankie Howard, and but I had no idea any of this was going on. The way I came into that world was through the Joeys. So it was that way round rather. So then I became extremely aware of it very quickly after I started performing. And then I was hugely impressed by numerous people I saw then. But certainly Rick, very, very clearly, I saw him a couple of times.
Where did you see him? In what capacity? At the comic strip?
The comic strip. And so I'd met Nigel Planer. It's lost. Neither of us can remember. Actually, and I can't remember where we met. But I met Nigel before the Young Ones a couple of times, and I saw him doing Neil, the character he did in the Young Ones, on stage in quite a posh club on Baker Street that was a comedy venue one night a week. Now, I cannot remember what that was called. And I would think it was fairly short-lived as such. And he was on, John Dowie was on, Nige did it, can't remember, but he did Neil, where he was sort of whining and doing his Neil character, and how awful it was to be at school called Neil, because he'd be kneeling and they'd say, Neil, stand, Neil, stand. He did kneeling down and standing up. Tragic. But so I'd known Nigel. So then by the time the Young Ones appeared, I was then full-time Joeying around the country. And suddenly this guy I'd met a few times, I didn't really know him well, but we'd always got on well, was on the telly, like proper telly, as a hippie in the Young Ones, which was like, the Young Ones was mind-boggling that happened, at that time. For me, that came completely out the blue, even though I'd met these people and done gigs by then, had done gigs with the Dangerous Brothers and Rick on his own. And because I always get confused.
20th Century Coyote.
That was Rick and Aid, was it?
Yes, and the Dangerous Brothers. The 20th Century Coyote was what they went by in their university days, and I think
that's right. No, but that was Rick and the man who did. Oh, was that Rick and Aid? Because Rick did stuff with the guy that. Oh no, Nige did stuff with the guy who directed the comic strip. And
that was The Outer Limits. That was with Peter Richardson.
Richardson. Thank you. That was what. So that's where. So it's all lost in the mist of time a bit. Anyway, there was one particular gig that we did which would have been a bit later then. So the miners' strike, 1982. We did a few gigs for the miners' strike, and I was always conflicted. And I do remember long conversations in backs of vans, which was a precursor to what I later went on to do. I was going, I don't think mining is a good job. Sending people down a hole to dig up coal that's really dirty, and we shouldn't be burning coal. I definitely remember having that. I didn't have an alternative to burning coal, but I just meant it's really 19th century. It's time to move on. So therefore, defending jobs where people have to do incredibly dangerous work, where they mostly die young because of what happens to them breathing and all that stuff was. I was a conflicted miners supporter, but anyway, we did that. We did a gig at the Islington Town Hall where we wrote a song, which I've tried to remember. I've got no record of it. It wasn't particularly brilliant, but we wrote a song in support of the miners, which we wrote the music and rehearsed and did a dance routine. And it took ages, like 2 days, hard work. And then we did it that night. It's the only time we ever performed it. And it went down fine. They liked it. It was supportive. They clapped. They might even have laughed once during the song. I can't remember. It was fine. And then we went off feeling all sort of, aren't we good? Aren't we? We were virtue signaling.
That'll change things. Take that back.
Well, then Rick walked on after that. Immediately after us, he walked on. And all he said was, "Do you want to see my pants?" That was his entire piece. He did about 15 minutes of that, and he had his army blanket underpants that came up to his nipples, you could see out, and it was just incredible. I was at the back of the room. It's quite a big hall. I would think it's probably 400 or 500 people there, in hysterics. And he just did a look. He said, "Do you want to see my pants?" If he said anything else, I can't remember it. He probably did say something else, but it was just went on and on. People just in hysterics. And he just walked around in his special walk with his hideous underpants.
What was the reaction to the young ones when it came out? Do you remember, did you get an impression was this is something new and exciting? There's never been anything like this before.
Yeah. No, it was absolutely, I think we were very jealous. But also we realized that it was so different to anything we were doing, I think the other thing that is kind of important to remember is that, which I learned much later, is that the four of us, is this fair? I'm just trying to make sure. Yeah, none of us had been to university. So Nigel, who was our musician, was a very skilled industrial designer, and he'd done that, but he'd done like technical college, polytechnic study. The rest of us hadn't been. I didn't go to university. None of us did. So we weren't out of that world. And in a way, I projected onto Rick and A that they met at uni and they're overprivileged. And, that was would have been my early criticism of them, which is very unfair. And in a way, why I got on with Nige playing, because Nige was slightly outside that world. And it was only later that I then met people like Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, Emma Thompson, who really were from a hyper-privileged background, who really went to, the most exclusive university and were phenomenally successful from very early on. That was definitely a bone of contention.
That's really interesting, though, that you felt that way about Rick and Aid for them having been to even Manchester University.
Yeah.
And the divide, because often people talk about Oxbridge. And
yes, yeah. I think we were just fairly insecure in every aspect. Now, looking back, in every aspect of our lives, because there was a little interesting Rick story that we played at the University Theatre in Manchester, the Joeys did, and it was brilliant. We had a brilliant gig there. There were really wonderful audiences. This was at the in-between series 1 and 2 of The Young Ones when we did that. And we were kind of put up in different houses all around the town by the people at the university. We didn't stay in a hotel. It was all very budgety. And I stayed in a really lovely sort of bit of a feminist squat. I felt very at home. I can't remember where it was, in Altrincham or somewhere in Manchester. And Nige stayed in a house in a sort of, we dropped him off in the van. We sort of had all these addresses. He dropped him off there after the gig. And he went in there. And I did notice when he opened the door, there was a huge picture of Rick Mail that faced the door, really like a life-size, if not bigger, photograph of him pinned to the wall, which I thought was a bit odd. But then we carried on. So we later found out that was the house of his then girlfriend. Right. And this is the problem with memory, because Lisa Myers. Lisa Myers, thank you very much. So it was her father's house. He was a teacher, a lecturer at Manchester University. So Nige stayed there, and Rick was there writing The Young Ones series 2 with Ben Elton, and Lisa. And I never saw any of them then. And then Nige came out and went, I've just had a really weird breakfast with Ben Elton, Rick Mail, Lisa. And we went, oh my God, what were they there? We had no idea.
Obviously, The Young Ones was a huge hit across its 2 series, and many of the creatives, so 3 of the main 4 of the cast, and Ben Elton went on to do Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, which is sort of look at their entry into the world of entertainment. Was that something that you watched and that you enjoyed?
No, much less so. I mean, I was an obsessive Young Ones fan, and Filthy Rich and Cat Flap kind of it didn't work for me. And I was then became suspicious of what they were doing, because I was like, this is a bit naff. Why have they done this? It was whereas the comic strip, I mean, that's the thing we haven't mentioned. The comic strip I thought was legendary. Some of the best opening and middle bits of any TV comedy I've ever seen, and always the shittest ending, like no ending, just nothing. It just faded. They just stopped. You'd be watching it going, this is amazing. And then it would stop. And that was it. That was the end. Utterly crap at endings, but brilliant ideas.
They didn't even do the Monty Python thing of just having the police turn up at the end to arrest everyone.
No, nothing at all. But some of the funniest sequences, and really clever plays on, contemporary ideas at the time. No, I love that. That was brilliant.
So as a performer, you were performing all through the 80s, and it's quite a well-known story that you were performing a show that Paul Jackson came to see.
Yeah.
And that was what led to Red Dwarf. We just wondered, though, in terms of as a performer on stage, were you aware that there was a huge, big shot comedy producer in the audience? And if so, does that sort of focus the mind, or does it induce nerves for a performer?
Oh, no, absolutely the opposite. No, bizarre now. Because it's what I'm always bad at is my chronology, whatever that word is, the timeline. So Andrew Bailey was a very popular comedian in that era on the circuit. He didn't do much telly, but he did do Friday Night Live, and he did a brilliant show where he would be Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and he would speak in mock Russian, but with occasional terms that you would understand. So you would hear, muesli. and then someone off stage would translate, in my language, there is no word for muesli, which was brilliant. So on about 10 of those gigs that he did on the circuit, I did the voice. So I'd have a script, but you really had to be on the case, because Andrew was dyslexic and completely close to properly barking mad. So he would often go completely off script. And he'd say something, he goes, Morris Minor. And I'd be going through what the fuck is the Morris Minor line? I don't know what that is. So I'd just say, I have driven across the steppes of northern Russia in a Morris Minor, just had to make stuff up. So then he got a booking on Friday Night Live, with which Paul Jackson was involved with. And I did the voice off stage. I didn't appear on it. And he went down a storm. It was very good. But I met Paul Jackson then, and I'd met him on other things. But of course, I cannot now bloody remember what they were or what it was. I know that I was in a rehearsal room with Harry Enfield when he was doing Stavros.
Oh, okay.
With Paul Whitehouse. And I sat with Paul Whitehouse. And anyway, so I'd met Paul Jackson a few times before he came up to me in Edinburgh and said, can I get a ticket for the show? And I said, no, because it was sold out. I said, I don't know what to do. So I eventually found a chair, and I put it on the side of the stage. He wasn't in vision for most of the audience, although if you were on it was in a sort of horseshoe venue. So if you're on the far side, you would have seen him sitting in the dark at the side. That's the only way you could get him in. It was really packed out. So I actually was like, the hassle of getting a chair in and getting him in was the problem once the stage was on, because I didn't want to, I don't know. I mean, I was so high on the fact that this show that I'd written was such a success. I didn't give a toss about anything else, basically. That's the thing. Yeah. And I'd also had a meeting with Channel 4 who wanted to commission it as a series. So from my point of view, I'd hit pay dirt when I did. It was called Mammon, Robot Born of Woman. So it was about a robot. And the voice of Kryten, now I can see, was sort of used in there as as the internal voice of the robot. So the external was my British middle class accent, but internally it was a gently spoken computer voice. It was that sort of thing when I had thoughts. That was how we did it on stage. And Kryten, it wasn't Kryten, Mammon, his name was. There was one sequence where I copulated with a desk, which was it was a bit bottomish. It was a cheap gag that went down a fucking storm every night, and it was brilliant to do, so it always went, because my creator uploaded some sexual awareness software, and it obviously went wrong the first time. So I would just find any static object I'd find highly desirable. And there was a desk on the stage. I did hurt myself quite severely, and I was wondering whether I could ever have children. There was a couple of nights when I got a bit too carried away.
Oh, fantastic.
But anyway, so yeah, Paul Jackson didn't not then, but then he basically talked me into doing Red Dwarf, because at that time I was kind of I was hot comedy property for about 20 minutes. I thought, in my own little world. And the TV version of Mammon Robot Born a Woman never saw the light of day, which is probably just as well. So so then I met Rob and Doug from Red Dwarf.
I've been to several dimension jumps in the past, by the way, Robert, and I know there are no more questions possible that we could ask you left about Red Dwarf. And as we're talking bottom today, we're going to move on to bottom, if that's all right. But so obviously you kind of worked with Rick and Aid alongside them, but you hadn't actually worked kind of together with them on anything then before bottom.
No, not at all. No, I mean, I'd probably spoken to them half a dozen times at gigs, and when I say spoken, I went, hi. and I love the young. I think I did do a bit of rapture about the young ones at some point, but by then I knew Nigel Planer quite well. So like by the 90s, I'd worked with Nigel a lot. We'd done a lot of stuff together. So by then he and I were firm friends. So that was there was a connection there. But then the main connection as to why I ended up at bottom was Ed Bye. So Ed Bye was the director of Red Dwarf.
That's what we wanted to ask. We've had Ed Bye on the show previously.
Right.
It was Ed then that cast you in.
I mean, I can't remember, but I'm assuming that is the reason. I can't see any other reason why I would have got in there, because I had quite a checkered acting career, I think is the best way of putting it. So I think I did go to, like, once I was doing Red Dwarf for a bit, I did go to auditions to do acting, like proper acting, and it would have been around that time, now I think about it, that I got booked to do a series called Grushko, which starred Brian Cox, not the scientist, the actor, which was set in Russia. So I filmed that in St. Petersburg, but it was a drama. I wasn't a comedy character, and I was appallingly bad. I mean, really, dreadful. I could not do it. And I had to do a slight Russian accent where you speak like that, but not too much, because I would start to talk like this. I am Russian. No. That's too funny. Calm it down. But amazing actors in it. So Andy Serkis was in that, the guy who went on to be Gollum and all sorts of things. Amazing. I mean, I'd worked with Andy before, and he was chasing me through the streets of St. Petersburg as a Chechen hitman. And the crew kept laughing when I was doing panicking, running for my life, running. I wasn't trying to be funny. I genuinely wasn't. I was trying to do, this guy's trying to fucking kill me. I'm going to get into the part. And they just were in hysterics. And the director got properly, like in movies where the director loses it and wants to kill an actor. He was fucking furious because it cost a fortune. And I was pissing about, from his point of view, getting a cheap laugh out of the crew. Just had funny bones. I don't know what it was. Yeah, I really wasn't trying to be funny. And of course, Andy is so fit. He'd be chasing me with a gun in a shell suit, and he'd fucking overtake me. And I go, you just got to run slower. Anyway, sorry. So I didn't want to do acting, and I didn't want to do auditions. So that's why I think by the time I did Bottom, it would have had to be Ed saying, do you want to be in it? Like, not, you don't have to do an audition, turn up on day one with your script and see what happens, So I think that must have been it. But because you'll know when that was recorded, because I've been trying to remember that, because I know my wife came to the recording, and I think she was pregnant, which would place it in 1993.
Right. Well, the series 2 was out in 92, I think.
Oh, so
91 was 91. Well, this is 30 years on this year from the first series.
From the first series, okay.
By the time it was broadcast, perhaps it was more like. But I think
but it was. I'm trying to remember. I remember Judy being at the actual recording. So I think that must have been 92 then. So we hadn't got children. No, she wasn't pregnant.
Maybe that night. We don't know.
Just to celebrate the rat party. Yeah.
No, she's told me when we made our son, who's lovely. He's now 28 any minute now, which was in Australia when I had jet lag, which I can't remember anything. So that's how a lady gets you. Get him when he's got jet lag.
I'll remember that tip.
Yes.
What's your memory of when you first got the script for Parade, the episode you're in? It kind of been a bad day's work having to spend the whole day in the pub.
Yeah, no, right? it was really, no, it was enormous fun. And it was interesting because, okay, so by then, so that was, let's say it was 92, we'll agree on that. So 89, we made Red Dwarf, and we rehearsed at the BBC's rehearsal rooms at North Acton, which are no longer there, which was this weird, like office block of rehearsal rooms where you would get in a lift with any number of people that are, properly famous British comedians, magicians, or funny people doing their rehearsals there. So the first year I did Red Dwarf, we rehearsed there, and in the next door office, if you like, rehearsal room on the same floor, two big rehearsal rooms on each floor, was Blackadder, was the final series of Blackadder. So it was that whole heady atmosphere of stuff. So when I went back there to do the bottom rehearsals, and I hadn't been there since 89, so a few years, and it was kind of amazing to go back to that place and do proper BBC rehearsals with proper markings on the floor where the set was going to be and all that stuff, like a proper old-fashioned sitcom. It was extraordinary and lovely cast. Julia Sawala, have I got that right?
Yeah.
Was the barmaid, who was fantastic. I had met before and I can't now remember why, but anyway, I had. And also Chris Langham, who I'd known for a few years, whose reputation is now slightly sullied. I think we were going to avoid mentioning him, but sorry, I didn't mean to mention him. But he did have quite a big part in it, didn't he, I suppose? But that was great. And then it was all that stuff. I think I'm really glad that I did it at that time, because I basically enjoyed it. I think if I hadn't done any TV or not much before then, I would have been so terrified and anxious about it, that I wouldn't have enjoyed it. But because I'd done by then, I don't know, 4 series of Red Dwarf, I'd kind of got that down where I understood what was expected of me, and I don't know, it was enormous fun to do.
You mentioned the rehearsals. You must have loved it when you saw the blocking for the episode, because of course your character is sat on the stool for the entire
strapped to a stool. I mean, I was actually tied to a stool that was eventually had to be bolted down in some way because I kept falling off it. It was it was a real balancing act, because you're basically on I know it was bloody uncomfortable, because I had 2 legs in. That's right. I was sitting at a really awkward sideways position, having to twist around so that the false leg, it looked like I was facing that way, but actually my legs are that way. So I'd have both legs in one trouser leg that was sort of hidden next to the bar.
And you have to be quite physical in that as well, because of course you're hitting Richie and so forth.
Yes.
What do you remember from filming?
Well, I mean, I certainly remember in the rehearsals I hit him, which was terrible because I timed, and that was my fault. I timed it wrong. So he was brilliant. I mean, it's so bad for you doing that head flicking, which he did it so well. And he said, don't worry about it, just really go for it. And I went, oh God, it was so frightening. And then, so I do the cut, but they had the guy in the rehearsal studio with a keyboard that did the punches. So that I just thought was the most brilliant thing in the world. So you'd go like that, there's no noise. And then you go, boom, oh, wow. Boom, 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 boom. And he would hit those points so well. And he had different noises, but he's there watching with his keyboard. All that stuff was just fucking brilliant. That was just such fun.
That must give you a big boost also when you're filming, to be hearing it live.
Yes,
I mean, you've got the
absolutely. No, it's not added on afterwards. No, they played that live, which was really magical.
Is that why you got carried away and actually gave Rick a cut? Was it his jaw you caught?
Yeah, punched him. And I mean, it's the thing, I mean, the 2 very good doctor mates of mine years ago said, what we see in Casualty on Saturday night is people with broken hands, is big, tough blokes walking in with their fingers all smashed up because they've punched someone in the head. Their head is very solid and your hands are quite delicate. So their advice to you, if you want to get involved in violence, is you always hit like that. Yeah. Hit with the palm of your hand under the chin. That will, and if you want to hurt someone really badly.
That's what the doctors tell you.
A doctor told me that. He said, don't punch someone with your fist. You're a bloody idiot. So when I hit him, it's the only time I've ever hit another human being with my fist in the head. It was really painful. I mean, it really hurt my hand, but I was so worried for it. So he'd done a head back, head forward, and I just timed it wrong and just caught him. And it did hurt him. I mean, he did stop. But he kept saying, it's all right. But you could tell. I think I hit him on the cheek rather than the jaw, which was good because then you can do a lot of damage in that. But yeah, that was not good. But that was not on the recording. That was in the rehearsals. But that made me very much more careful when we were recording it.
Yeah. Did the shoot go without incident? Was it a good record?
Yes, I think so. From my memory of it, it was really successful. So the bits I was in, I was very aware of the laughs it was getting, and that was you'll love this bit. So the first day we were in rehearsals I had the full costume on, so it was a dress run. So I had the proper leg in the proper trousers that they'd use, and there was a huge amount of discussion and how that we do that bit. But the bit where he puts his hand up my leg a bit, and he goes, and then a bit further, and goes, well, before he did that, he held my shoulders. He said, "You're right." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Watch the master at work." Now, if any other comedian had done that, or any performer I've ever met, you'd go, "You pretentious twat." And I just went, fucking brilliant. What a joy. So I sat there and he put his hand up. And then a little bit further. And he had like 5 grades of till he got his hand right up to undo the buckle. It was just, and then he pulled the leg out, and it was just, I mean, it was just, I was in, when we were rehearsing that, I was just in hysterics. And I remember Ed getting a bit moody with me. Can he fucking hell, Robert, sharp? Because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do my lines. I just was.
You managed to keep it together for
on the night. Yes, I did manage to keep it together, but it was so. He was so funny. That was just
in Rick's hands.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute. That was an absolute joy to work with them that time, and they were so. I mean, I suppose they could be diva-ish and moody or whatever. They really weren't. I mean, they were very. It was very much treated like an ensemble performance, with all the other people in it.
Do you recall what your character's name was? Because it's never mentioned in the episode, but it is listed in the credits.
Oh, is it? He has a name in the credits.
He has a name.
I've got no idea.
His name is Mr. N. Stiles.
N. Stiles. Sorry, yes, I did. I'd forgotten.
Because that episode has a few references to footballers. So
Nobby Stiles.
Plays a detective called Chief Inspector Grobbelaar, which is Bruce Grobbelaar. Right. So must have been Rick and A putting in a few football references for that episode.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, it was never referred to in the script, was it? We didn't say. They never asked me. Yes, I'd forgotten that. No, I did know that. Yes, I had forgotten that.
And you've mentioned you worked with a lot of the cast in Parade, of course. Did you already know Lee Corns at all? I know.
Yes. Yeah. No. Done. I would think I'd probably met most of them before. I wouldn't. They weren't like close buddies, but they were people I'd done gigs with. So Lee Corns definitely did a lot of shows where he would compare and introduce us all. That kind of comedy circuit. The Joeys were also from sort of late 82, 86, 85, 86. We were doing 5 or 6 shows a week. We did hundreds of shows a year, literally hundreds of performances. So we were all over the place on all sorts of bills, of various types with all sorts of people. So yeah, definitely. Isn't Andy de la Tour? Is he in it?
Yeah.
Yes. So Andy, I've done loads of stuff with Andy.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I mean, just to ask, obviously you'd performed to audiences all over them. Was there a marked response from the audience in the bottom studio on the night of filming that you can remember? Was it more uproarious or? It
was pretty hot. Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, by then, one of the, certainly don't want to talk about Red Dwarf, but that was the 2 times that I can remember clearly when I've gone, oh my God, this is amazing, is really blisteringly good Joey's performances. No, we did a gig at the Royal Exchange in Manchester, which for some reason, out of hundreds of gigs, just stayed in my memory because it was exceptionally successful. And there was a massive queue for returns. We'd never been on the telly, and we had thousands of people trying to get in, and it was full. And it just went down a storm. And I just remember being on the stage, listening to people laughing and going, this is incredible that this is happening. I just couldn't believe it. And the only other time I've really experienced that is on Red Dwarf. I think in particular, pulling off Craig's shorts when we had to stop recording. We couldn't hear each other because of the noise. Well, the bottom recording was bloody close to that. It was phenomenal audience response from it. And it was a bit, I think I felt sort of one removed in a sense that it wasn't, I didn't feel as involved in that as I did in Red Dwarf, I guess, because of, just doing that one episode. But it was I think I was very aware that it was a privilege to do.
Were you recognised from that episode? I guess more so than because of Kryten, obviously the mask and stuff. And, but your DNA episode, you show your face for the first time, and then
I mean, it is my wife remembers this more in a way more than me, but we used to go out and no one would come up to me in the streets, no one would say anything really around that period. So I had sort of 10 years of being in a successful BBC sitcom, and it did happen, but it was very, very rare. It was usually, are you the bloke that does that thing with the head? It was that kind of level of stuff. And that was seriously like 3 times a year that happened. It was not a common thing, and that was great.
Were you ever? I say we don't want to talk about Red Dwarf. I'd love to talk about Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
Were you ever out with Chris and Craig, and Danny, and everyone else was recognised, and they were like, "Who are you?"
Oh God! I mean, it was then it was weird. It was instantaneous. So I once talked Chris into catching the tube because we were going from a rehearsal to something. I can't even remember what. And he went, "Well, we'll have to get a car, Bobby. You've got to get a car." I said, "We're not going to sit in a bloody car in the middle of London. You pull it. Let's get on the tube. There's only 4 stops up there." So
cars though, yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't like getting on the tube. And of course, then as soon as we got down there, everyone's looking at him. There's people coming up wanting his autograph and all that. And then they see me and they immediately then did know who I was. That was a really weird experience. And with Craig, you could sat outside a cafe with Craig in Soho once, and he was asking people that didn't look and stop if they, hey, do you know who I am? So very different. So when I was with them or with Danny, it's very, and in fact, I was with Danny about a month ago in Notting Hill in Portobello, near where he lives. And it's just impossible to move with Dan because everyone knows him. And then they all realize who I am. And then you get, so we did about, as we met for lunch, we were together for about 3 hours. I reckon we did 200 selfies in that time. Wow. But that's because Danny encourages it. I mean, but yeah, generally speaking, I wasn't recognized. I absolutely have no recall. I don't think anyone was watching in the audience going, "Oh my God, that's Kryten." No one. I would say no one except my wife would be the only one.
She was going, "Oh, that's Kryten."
Yeah, she was nudging people. That's Kryten, and they went, "Who's that?"
And I'm going to be pregnant with his baby very soon.
Yes.
How did you find Rick and Ada's performers to work with?
Just a joy. I mean, I think the thing is, I have a very strong memory of spending a lot of time with Rick doing that, and not so much with Ade. So I think my, on-screen relationship was with Rick more than Ade. So I do remember, I kind of remember like talking to him, how we do the leg, when I punch him, all those, how we time when I'm drinking, and there's all that stuff. I can't even, there was a lot of discussion, which Ade wasn't really involved with. But because of knowing Ed, and through Ed, Ruby Wax, and through Ruby Wax, Jennifer Saunders, I kind of knew Ade more, I suppose, in terms of outside work. So I'd met Ade more times. I'd really met Rick only 1 or 2 times. I didn't know him at all well. And also, I've sort of seen Ade a few times since those periods, through Ed and Ruby. That was, so I've worked a lot with Ruby more recently, and obviously worked with Ed a lot. So, that's the connection, I think. I was
going to say the characters they play, Richie and Eddie, are quite sort of unique characters in the world of sitcom. They're sort of they're slightly grotesque. They're very perverse, and they have a sort of cartoon world. What do you sort of make of them as sitcom characters?
I mean, I just think they're glorious because they just don't give a shit about the sort of I'm sure there are books about how to construct a sitcom and how to develop the characters, and they've just sort of looked at that and gone, "Fuck that. I'm going to do a bloke who's a massive perv who stabs his best friend in the scrotum with a fork at any opportunity, slams his head in the door for no reason. Then the gas man comes around to read the gas meter and they beat him to death with cooking implements." I mean, what's the character? I don't know. Is there a backstory to either of them? If there is, you kind of don't want to know what it is. I just thought it just felt like, what do you call that when you make whiskey?
Distillation?
Distilled, highly distilled comedy. Right. That's what it felt like. More than in the young ones, they were sort of characters that you could sort of sense had a backstory and why are they there. Whereas with Bottom, I thought it was a beautiful piece of anarchic comedy, with no other worries. It didn't have any anxieties about what else, what's my backstory? Because even if I'd said, "What's my backstory?" You've got one leg and you lost it in the Falklands. Shut up, just fucking punch him. That's the backstory.
Well, yeah, we like to ask the actors who've been on the show their ideas of backstories and stuff with the characters. So I want to ask you, so not your backstory, what do you think happened to your character after the episode with his leg missing, and his other one obviously hideously mangled from being dislocated and put back in and blind drunk? What do you think happened after?
That's because I've forgotten about they mash up his real leg.
It's the wrong leg.
So, I mean, Yeah, I haven't. Yes, what happens? He had to hop out to go to the clinic to try and get a new leg. I mean, one of the most amazing / disturbing responses I had to being in Bottom was at the Oxford services on the M40. I don't know how long ago. I had an electric car, so within the last 10 years, and I was in the foyer getting a coffee, and there was some guys that came out sort of the bogs in shorts. It was in the summer, in shorts, and 2 of them had prosthetic legs and one had a prosthetic arm. They were ex-soldiers, and they'd been injured in Iraq. And I got to talk to them, and they love scrap heap. So that's how I met them and talked to them. And I'd done some filming made some voiceover, something a long time before, for Help for Heroes, which was a thing, where they get to drive Land Rovers and get a rehabilitation for people who are like that. And I was looking at this guy, knelt down to look at this guy's leg, because it was unimaginable piece of high-tech equipment. It was amazing. And that was, I think, some members of the public slightly disturbed. But he loved Bottom. And I'd forgotten about it. And I said, oh my God, we were making fun of people who had limbs missing and stealing their legs and selling it to put on. And here's some people who's exactly that, basically war veterans who'd suffered unimaginable horror. And he said, I love that episode of Bottom you were in. That was brilliant when they snipped your leg. That was so funny. And I'm going, oh God. And I just couldn't speak. And I was in tears at the end of it, because it was, a very emotional thing to meet these guys. They were so extraordinary. So that was that. So the backstory of Mr. N Stiles is difficult, because he was sort of effectively a slightly negative character in that episode. And I did think, when you meet the actual people who have been in that position, you don't, I don't want to take the piss.
Well, I think he was only negative because he was seeing Richie there stealing valor, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yes. And that was great. I mean, that side of it was great.
That's it. Like, Richie's the one in the wrong.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. That's it. But it was also that, I don't know whether it was the right, there was some discussion about it, because I said, should he be an officer? Because that is the thing. I've experienced a lot of people in the forces from doing scrap heap. In particular, we had Navy teams, RAF teams, Army teams. Particularly the Navy is completely. It's just a reinforcing system for the British class system. So if you meet an officer in the Navy, he's basically a bloody good chap, talks like that, and gets the bloody job done. And if you meet a ratings, he's like that because he's from Dorset. And you go, how the fuck is this? This is Admiral Nelson levels of class distinction. The same in the army. I mean, basically bloody hell. So I was going to do a bloody good chap officer, and it just didn't work comedically. So then I did a sort of rubbish, kind of rough, I can't even remember what the accent was, but that was Ed Bye was very funny when we were talking about. I do remember that he was very funny when we talked about that, because he went, "Oh, you're not going to do your bloody 10 different accents like you did with Kryten," because Kryten went through a whole range of. Kryten was going to be Swedish at one time, and a lot of silly accents, and so that was sort of curtailed, and it was just generic squaddy.
Now it's time for a quick word from our sponsors.
Now, finally, in its 30th anniversary year, there's a book about Bottom. From the creators of the hugely popular podcast of the same name that regularly tops the iTunes charts and garners numerous 5-star reviews, Talking Bottom is a guide to the cult sitcom for everyone, from the new viewer to the devoted fan. It's written by 3 obsessives who grew up watching the show and have no social lives. As well as guiding you through the TV episodes, live shows and film, we'll go behind the scenes, finding out how it was commissioned and what it was like to make, talking to the people who made it, including director Ed Bye. The book will exclusively examine first draft scripts from the TV episodes and find out how it was first conceived. We'll examine Rick and Aid's influences. There'll be previously unseen pictures and original artwork. And most importantly, we want you to get involved. Secure your copy via the Unbound website now and see what other exclusive perks are available for a variety of prices. And tell us what you would like to see covered in the book via the Talking Bottom social media pages. Bottom on the face of it has a sort of very classic sitcom setup that you see in other things such as Red Dwarf or Steptoe and Son or Porridge.
Steptoe really reminded me of that. Yeah.
People trapped together who probably shouldn't be trapped together, but it also merges it with a very hyper version of slapstick comedy and cartoon violence. Do you think that's what makes it unique? And does anything else compare to it in that term, do you think?
Well, I can't think of another show with that level of slapstick. I mean, it was a really skilled. I mean, it was also, Ed loved it, so it was shot beautifully. He knew how to shoot that sort of thing. And when we've done kind of physical, like explosions or Kryten's head being used as a ramrod or things like that, that was very much Ed's. He got into that. He was really keen on it. But they're kind of, pulling the nose hair out with the pliers. I mean, it's just genius timing, and their physical, that sort of timing is like dancing, because if you get that timing wrong, then there's always an injury. You're going to have an injury. So they had to time that beautifully, and they did that so well together. So I think that was what the pleasure I got from it, was the high level of slapstick. And it was also that repetition thing. So I remember having discussions about that you do something that gets a cheap laugh, a punch, a clang, a thump in the, a frying pan in the face. You do it once and that's funny. You do it again, it's sort of funny. You do it 107 times in a row and it goes into another realm, which is dang, like the man with the gas, dang, dang, dang. They just did it for so long. And I always wanted to try and recreate those moments in Red Dwarf, and we never did. It's the wrong show for it. But I just said, can I just keep smashing my head against the door for 10 minutes?
When we talked to Ed By, he actually told us that that scene with the gas man came about because Rick and the sound man who played the effects live got into a bit of a competition with each other, and Rick was trying to catch him out. And so at one point you see him, he
stops, doesn't he?
He stops and fixes his wrist, and the guy was on it. Great physical comedy.
Yeah, I just love that. Yeah.
The Joeys seem to have a lot of physical performing elements of clowning in there. Is that that you do enjoy performing? Then you would have liked to have done more of it in Red Dwarf. Oh,
I mean, I think I did plenty. Yes. I mean, I think there was just one or two moments where I went, "Can we do something like that?" And I think there were bottom discussions, and as in, it's not bottom. You're Kryten, and you're meant to be cleaning the toilets. That stuff. But I mean, certainly, the Joeys there was some. I mean, I was certainly one of the sort of more extreme physical performers in that group in terms of comedy. I mean, because I'm saying that because Chris was had been at the Royal Ballet School, was a proper actual ballet dancer. So when he did, and that was something you didn't expect to see. You go and see an alternative anti-sexist men's comedy group, and someone does a jeté and a twirl that you would only see at the Royal Ballet, and you would hear the audience go, "Oh, what is this?" Because he was an amazing dancer. Not just a run-of-the-mill bit of a dancer. So in terms of physicality, we had that immense advantage of it. And I always wanted. I said, just do dance. Let's just do dance. It's amazing. When he did do a bit of it, it was so extraordinary to witness. It was so I loved that sort of goofing around, and I've never really done it, in a sense, other than in the Joeys. I've never found an outlet for that, and now I could be knackered trying to do something like that. I don't know. There's the one thing I do now, which bizarrely I haven't done for a long time, but I used to do with my children when they were little, and my wife, it's the only funny thing you've ever done. She said this last night, which is when I mock up rally driving. So I do all the noises and I change in gear, and then the gear stick comes off, and then the steering wheel comes off, and I'm steering it with the knurled axle thing. It's just a stupid little thing, but I used to do it with the kids on my lap, and I'd move their hands, and they did little steering with little gears. And for some reason, my wife, still after 35 years together, is in hysterical laughter when I do that. And I forget that I could get a cheap laugh out of it. And I forget that I did it for some reason last night, and she's still laughing now.
Was that where the Better Than Life thing came from, when you did that car chase?
Yes,
the car chase that you do.
Because I was driving in that, wasn't I? But I wasn't allowed to make the noises.
All right.
Yeah, it's a great bit of physical comedy in Red Dwarf.
I'd forgotten about that. Oh, well remembered. Yes, no, that's absolutely right. But I do remember being told, well, it's like Craig whenever we had the bazookoids, and we'd run in and Craig go, pew, 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 like when you're 6. And they go, Craig, don't make the fucking noises. We'll put that on after. Yes, very much.
We're fascinated by the dark and gross world Richie and Eddie incorporate in Bottom. And of course, Red Dwarf holds a very different but similarly unique sitcom setting. Do you think it stands to reason that obviously the situation in comedy being, dialed up from normality, where the characters can be exaggerated, that makes all the difference in making a truly great sitcom like Bottom or Red Dwarf?
Yes, I think you're right, and it does. And I mean, I think that the difference is, and I think it's critical. Well, I mean, there's been so many more Red Dwarfs, haven't there, in terms of episodes? But what Bottom didn't do, which Red Dwarf does do, there is a sort of element of humanity within Red Dwarf, very much focused around Craig, around Lister. And there are moments of, I mean, not necessarily sentiment, but certainly, heartfelt humanity. I don't know how else to put it. And I think that's why, in a way, why I still love Bottom, because they, they could have done that. There could have been a sequence where they've stabbed each other with forks, they've smashed each other in the face with frying pans, and then at the end they go, I couldn't live without you, mate, and they have a hug. You cannot.
Yeah, they undercut that, don't they? There's one of the live shows, isn't it? Thank you for being my friend. You hear, it's like, right, move on.
Yes.
Eddie's like, did you hear what I said? Yes.
Absolutely. But the pathos, that was in Steptoe and so on, and that kind of, that's where comedy and drama.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, that's in a way, I think. So as a kid, I would say my favorite sitcom was Steptoe. Really? And the dad, I loved the old, you dirty old man, all that, and I loved his face. And so the two influences I only realized much later. So after I'd been doing Red Dwarf for maybe 5 or 6 years, the two big influences were Herman Munster, Fred Gwynn in Herman Munster. So I was obsessed with the Munsters as a little kid. So that was on telly when I was in black and white when I was a child. I loved the Munsters, and I loved Steptoe. And my mum wouldn't let us talk in a Steptoe voice. My brother and I would do it. You dirty old man, do not speak like that. My mum was very posh, and she hated it. I mean, also Till Death Us Do Part, if we did Alf Garnett, which we'd love to do. So one time we were on holiday in Cornwall, I remember it very clearly. My brother and I had to go out to sea. We had to be waist deep in the sea in order to do Alf Garnett. And I always remember that, standing there with the waves crashing against us. Everywhere I look, as far as human eye can see, bloody foreigners coming in the country. We were allowed to do it then, but we had to shout it out so she couldn't hear it.
Steptoe and Son, of course, is quite similar to Bottom in the regard that you've got characters that are kind of at the bottom of society's heap. Do you think that class plays an important factor in UK comedy? In
UK comedy, definitely, yes. Yeah. I think it does. I mean, Dad's Army is a really good example of that, of sort of embittered, successful lower middle class, as in Captain Mannering, and posh, laconic, don't really care, darling, about the whole thing. That was beautifully observed bit of class-based comedy. And I mean, it is such a uniquely British thing. It's only when, I've now had the privilege of living outside the UK for quite some time, and having, I had a French girlfriend for a long time and spent quite a lot of time in France and Italy. And you go, there isn't a class system. There isn't a class system here. It's based on your accent. There is wealth discrepancy, and there's rich people and poor people. But you can be a billionaire and have the same voice, and it's only your vocabulary in French. I mean, when I learnt that, you wouldn't ever be able to judge someone in the first 3 words you hear from them, how wealthy they were, or where they went to school, or what area of the country they came from. You'd have to get to know them a bit longer. Whereas in England, I can hear someone say 4 words and I can pretty closely place. We all can. It's just in our culture, isn't it? So I think that is why, having and that was it. I mean, in a sense, Rick and Aid Bottom, they were classless, but they were at the bottom of the pile. Because in a sense, if you think of how Rick spoke, he didn't speak with he wasn't talking like a Cockney or like a Mancunian, or Liverpudlian. He was sort of middle class. His accent. He's
gone into it, and he's a Tory, isn't he, Richie?
Yeah,
he's a horrible,
slimy Tory, and I've met people like him who are horrible, slimy Tories. They really exist. Well, then he went on to do Alan Bastard as well, which was a very well observed bit of horror. And those people, every time you see a new Tory MP has been put in the cabinet office, none of us got a clue who he is. And you go, he's bent, he's a crook, he's two-faced, he's a liar, he's a cheat, and his mates are getting backhanders that we're paying for. He's Alan Bastard, he's just...
Even Richie and Eddie, whilst they lived in this sort of grotty, grimy universe in a fetid flat, they were still sort of quite nicely turned out, wearing, Eddie always wore a suit, Richie would wear a shirt and a tie. We always felt it was quite sort of similar to those sitcom characters who were trying to, better themselves and rise up the social ladder, like Basil Fawlty and, that
Rising Damp, all those.
Yeah.
No, you're right about that. I mean, I think the other intriguing connection between, I'd not thought about it before, but between Steptoe and, which is kind of down to where the BBC is, but with Steptoe and Bottom is it was both basically set in Shepherd's Bush. That's where that opening footage now, when you think of, I sort of imagine like my son watching that, and he sees people sitting on a chair, and there's sort of building works going on. Well, that building work was finished in like 1993. It's a massive structure now, and you think, God, that is so weird. I think that's a thing that I find hard to describe to people my children's age, how unutterably shit the material world that we lived in the 1970s. I lived in London in the 1970s. It was bomb damaged. I lived in a squat. The only reason it was a squat, no one wanted to live there, because the building behind it had been blown up in World War II. This was 1975. So quite 30 years after the war. It was a total wreck, and it was a wild garden that had been a house. It was brilliant. We had chickens in it. It was a magical place. Yeah, it was kind of like, and you sort of forget how awful the structure of the buildings and how all that stuff was just such a tip. And they capture that, the set that Bottom has. I've lived in so many houses that were like that, with a gas cooker that stank, and was just really dangerous, and a shitty old fridge that, I mean, I had a fridge for years that we had a shovel in the house, and you lever the door. It was on a slopey floor, so the door would always open. The fridge worked, but the door didn't shut. I don't remember. The magnetic strip had come off, or so it was really crap. And we had a shovel that you'd hook into two of the floorboards and put under the handle, and that's how you shut the fridge door. I think I lived with that fridge for probably 2 years. That was just normal.
Improvise, why not?
Yeah.
But Aid has been quoted as saying that him and Rick essentially ripped off Galton and Simpson, and they never sued them over it.
Right.
Did you ever talk to Rick or Aid about Galton and Simpson and Steptoe and? I think we might. You see, I really connect Steptoe with it, so it is possible there were discussions about that in the rehearsal room. But I mean, I think by the time I did it, so it was series 2, wasn't it?
Yes.
They were in their stride with it. So essentially for them, it was another episode, and there were some actors in it that were in that one, and they were nice. They were anything but horrible to me, but it did feel like I'd kind of gone in to do that gig, and they were on a roll with it.
Established the universe, and the influences were there.
Does it surprise you that people are still talking about Bottom 30 years later?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it is, when people mention it, when they say, or also that's one of the things of Twitter. It kind of died down, but there was certainly a long period when I first went on Twitter and had people come and say, "Oh, Red Dwarf, blah blah," and they go, "Were you the guy sitting at the bar in Bottom with one leg?" That I've been asked that hundreds of times, on both in real life and on Twitter. So. And that's, still happens. So it is, from my point of view, it was 1 week's work. The whole thing was started rehearsal on Monday morning. We recorded it, I think, on a Friday evening, and that was it.
Was it just 1 day's filming?
Yes, it was. I'm just trying to make sure that is right. I'm pretty sure it was. I think we were 1 day in the studio, because we always did 2 days in the studio with Red Dwarf. I think it was 1 day. I think we did it in 5 days. Yeah.
I think on Bottom they would do 2 days in the studio if there was some special effects that needed to be done. So if there was a big fight scene or something, they'd come in and record that the day before.
Right.
I guess for you, it would have just been the one night in front of the audience.
I'm pretty sure it was only one night. Yeah, I can't remember being in a studio like without an audience. I remember we did a camera rehearsal when there was no audience and went through all that, but I can only remember. Yes, I can't remember. Yeah,
there's a lot of crossover between the actors and creatives on Bottom and Red Dwarf. Yourself, Peter Ragg, Paul Jackson,
Peter Ragg, yeah,
Ed Bye, Paul Bradley, Mark Williams, Lee Corns.
Yeah,
was there ever any talk, rumors, whatever, of Rick and Aid coming on doing guest spot on Red Dwarf?
I don't think so. I would have loved it. Yeah, I can't remember even it being discussed. I mean, it would have been fantastic to have him as a sort of vile hologram to goad Rimmer. I don't know. There wasn't. I mean, there was, just trying to think if there was ever, I can't ever remember that being discussed. No.
It was brilliant.
Rick would pop up in Blackadder as Flashheart every now and then. But then him and Aid got to share a scene in the final series where Aid played a Gestapo officer who captured them.
Yes, of course. I'd forgotten that. So what's interesting about that is they must have been next door to us. They must have been rehearsing during that time because we overlapped. We were basically there for the same time. We started and finished roughly the same time. We only knew that because Tony Robinson used to come and sit with us and have lunch with us quite often because he was less than enamored of some of the members of the cast. I don't want to spread idle gossip, but I think that was quite an Oxbridge thing going on there, but with Ben Elton. So Ben Elton used to do the warm-ups for the Joeys. And so I've worked with Ben a hell of a lot of times. And I don't see him very often now, but of all that group, he would be the one I know the best, other than Nige, I suppose. But Ben, the last time I saw him, which was probably 5 years ago, he went, "All right, Robert, rock, yeah, right on the Joeys." He did a clenched fist salute and said, "The Joeys." I haven't been in the Joeys since 1985. I'm very happy you remember it because we did hundreds of gigs together. I mean, that was a very common thing. And he was a material that guy churned out was mind-boggling. Just
was he a hard act to follow as a warm-up? Would you sort of go, "Oh God, he's actually, he's been too good"?
Yeah, no, I mean, he wasn't in the sense that he was really good and he would do a lot of new material every week. What was threatening for us was we'd work out a show. There was one time we did a long run of like 10 weeks in a row on a Saturday night in a community centre in Covent Garden, so right in the middle of town. And every week he'd come down from Manchester. So I think he must have still been, this would be very early 80s. He'd come down from Manchester and have a whole new lot of material. We were doing exactly the same set every week, and he'd do a whole new lot of stuff about Mrs. Thatch and loads of gags. And I went, how do you write that? It's just incredible speed that he wrote that out. But actually, because he was a solo stand-up and we were a 4-man troupe with really big opening songs and music and lights and a lot of other stuff, it didn't. Well, that was why he was really brilliant for us. He was really good fun.
Yeah, he's quite prolific when it comes to producing material.
Yeah,
isn't he?
Jesus, yeah.
In 2014, when Rick very sadly passed away, you tweeted how amazed and pleased you were to see all the papers paying tribute on the front page.
Yeah,
you think that's quite rare for a comedian to get that kind of reaction, but actually fully deserved for a man like Rick.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was so heartbreaking to hear that, and because I hadn't seen him for years. I'd seen him at Nige Planer's wedding. So he was there. And that was after he'd had his quad bike accident. Yeah, which was that was heartbreaking. So Nige saw a lot of him. And so that was, in a sense, my connection with Rick then was through Nigel. But no, it was just heartbreaking. Because I don't remember how old he was, but not old.
Yeah. What would you say would be your sort of defining memory of him?
I think that moment that he said, "Watch the genius at work." I think maybe it was "Watch the master at work." It might have been that term. Was such a lovely moment because it was so contradictory that I should have been hugely offended and critical. And I was in awe. I was sort of in love, I was just like, I'm so lucky to be strapped to this really uncomfortable fucking stool, nearly falling off. And this man is shoving his hand up my trouser leg. It was just, it did feel like an actual, I felt like, I'll tell you what, this is the only way I can sum it up, which made it hard to do that episode. It's like I was in the audience. That's what it felt like. That I was watching this fucking amazing performer, and I was really lucky because I was in the front row. That in a sense, that's the memory I have. It's not like we worked together in a collaborative way, and it was, which we did, but for those short moments that we did stuff together. But it was just awe-inspiring to be near that much. It's that much energy. So that's, I think, I'm sure Rick Aid would say this, but there was a sort of electric energy from him that I remember from, when I first saw him on stage and when he was doing that, there was some, which, it's not unique just to him. There's other comedians I've seen or heard about or watched on TV that are of that level of sort of electrifying. You can't take your eyes off them, I think Eddie Izzard is on that level when he does stand up. I've seen his stand up from really early days to his sort of superstardom, and he has something because it's very relaxed. It's not like, I'm not comparing him with Rick in that sense. It's a very relaxed thing, but it is something that you don't look at anything else while he's on the stage. And Rick had that in buckets. It was an extraordinary thing. Right from Kevin Turvey, that I remember suddenly going, "Who's that bloke with the eyes going all over the place?" It's just, he always held my attention. And so that little moment I had that, I feel that's a huge privilege that I had that moment by fluke of circumstance to spend that time with him. I mean, that was really, I was kind of aware that it was a mundane day-to-day day for him and a hugely important experience for me, you know. So I kept it in. I had to have a reality check, you know. I don't think Rick would say it was fantastic being able to work with Robert. You know, it was such a privilege. Don't think it wasn't that way round, but I'm so grateful that I did get to do that. So I should thank Ed, because I sort of forget about it. You know, it's one of those things that you just do and then you move on and do other stuff. I don't think I've ever thanked Ed for letting me be in the show, but
letting Rick feel you up the leg,
letting Rick shove his hand up my trousers.
Sounds like it would be the best day of my life if it had happened, Robert. So
yeah, even if it was a false leg.
Fantastic! Yeah. Wow.
No, it was great fun. Isn't it funny how you mix up memories? Because my memory is that I met Judy afterwards. When she came round to the dressing room and I was getting makeup off or whatever, and that she was pregnant then, but I'm sure she wasn't. No, she wouldn't have been. So it was 1992. That's weird, isn't it? You get those things mixed up.
What do you remember from behind the scenes when the cameras weren't rolling? Was there anything else from your time during Bottom?
I mean, it was in rehearsals. There was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of experimenting with Julia Sawalha as the barmaid, because she was so good at being so caustically. She reminded me of the women I fell in love with who were separatist feminists, who just be able to look at a man, don't have to say anything, and you just shrivel under their gaze, you know. So she was very, and I can't remember. I wish I could remember what happened, but there was some improvising going on where he was being really lecherous and disgusting. And she just didn't rise to the bait, which is what made it so funny. She didn't kind of get offended and tell him to fuck off. She just looked at him and went, you know.
Yes, like she's heard it before.
She's heard it so many times. And I mean, she was so gorgeous in that, you know, she was so pretty. And she was going out with a famous actor at the time, and I can't remember who it was, who came and picked her up every day. And he was in Band of Brothers.
Oh, Dexter Fletcher.
Dexter, thank you. Because I'd met Dexter quite a few times before that. So I knew him. I didn't know her, but she was great. Yeah, no, I remember that very much. And then I can remember a long conversation with Chris Langham, which we don't want to, because we don't want to talk about him, which was very funny. He was so wrong in some. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen his early performances. They were amazing, and you may want to cut this out and not use it at all, but he was a very funny performer. It's just that it's all gone a bit cheesy. That's a polite way of saying it. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know anything about him, but I don't know him very well, but you know.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, you're a veteran, of course, of sci-fi conventions. And we love them. There's a lot of love and appreciation for sci-fi, but we just wanted to say, do you think there's any reason why comedy doesn't get the same amount of intense fan adoration as that isn't sci-fi? There's no cross-referencing of genre of comedy like in Comic-Con for sci-fi. Do you think there's any reason for that beyond obviously there's a lot of geek kind of crossover in sci-fi, whereas comedy people are a bit more kind of cool?
I don't know. Yes, are they? Yes, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I mean, in that sense, I've straddled that divide. Not intentionally, but Red Dwarf is a sci-fi comedy, and I mean, I think the reason it has lasted and worked so well is that the sci-fi is plausible and has dignity. It isn't taking the piss of the sci-fi genre, if you like. No. It isn't a piss take of Star Trek or Star Wars or anything like that. So we've had that thing where that we have definitely had fans that if they do appreciate the comedy in Red Dwarf, it's not apparent. I think that's the nicest, polite way of saying it.
I agree. When I went to Dimension Jump, there were a few people who didn't seem to watch it for the comedy.
No, they watch it for the science fiction. Which is confusing, because from my point of view, it's like comedy. It's a comedy about certain science fiction, the comedy science fiction, but clearly for them, it's exactly the other way around, but I mean, I think that is because, Rob and Doug, the original writers, and now Doug, love sci-fi. Yeah. So they are proper, full-on, 100% sci-fi geeks. So they're not taking the piss out of it. They use it as the setting. It's a plausible universe that inhabits. So you're right, there is a crossover. So like the comedians that I know that are successful or have done stuff over the years tend not to watch Red Dwarf. And I think they think of me as that, the fucking idiot who does the rubber head. It's like I can't walk into a party where there's a lot of comedians that you may have heard of and they'll go, "Hey, Bob, fantastic to see you." It's the fucking rubberhead twat. Why is he here?
Well,
sure, that's not what they're saying out loud.
Well, I don't know.
They're just jealous.
Yeah.
As well as acting in several of our favorite shows, you're something of a renaissance man with a huge number of strings to your bow. You, as well as acting, you write, you present, you do live tours, and you're a notable supporter of green energy. What interests you the most? And if you could only choose one, how would you define yourself?
Oh God! I mean, I just want to point out that the strings of my bow are fairly tatty. They're not high quality strings. It's basically baling twine I found at the edge of a field. I think I have to say now that I feel, lucky through my career. It is such a fluke thing that if I've even had a career, I don't even know what it was. But, stuff happened that was great. And I was very lucky, Bottom being a really good example of that. But what I'm doing now is a sort of a passion project that has been lifelong. And it's really come back to me recently because I was involved in the creation of a book about the early alternative technology movement in the UK, where I went to an event called Comtech 74. So that dates it in 1974 in Bath, and it was community technology. And I was obsessed with it. So it was wind turbines, solar heating, alternative agriculture, how we could live in geodesic domes that had less impact on the environment, low impact technology, bicycle technology where you had 4-wheel bikes, which could carry cargo bikes, all that stuff. Then, I was obsessed with all that and was very involved in that. And then it kind of just life took over and I made shoes, which was a sort of basic, I'm not going to work in a factory and mass produce things. I'm going to make things beautifully that last people a lifetime, all that stuff. And then it then suddenly fell on stage and everything went to poo. Well, it's sort of come back. And some of the people that I met in my youth who are now retired, but were the two guys in particular who built a big wind turbine in a commune in Wales, which was a very hip thing to be involved in, communes in Wales, in the Welsh mountains. They built a wind turbine, which is a wooden tower. You think of what when we see wind turbines today, just think of the exact opposite of that. Much, much smaller, made of wood, scrap heap. It was very like if we built a wind turbine on scrap heap, that's what this would look like. It was made out of old recycled material, but it generated electricity for this house that didn't have mains connection, charged truck batteries and ran lights on a very, very crude level, and it all went wrong constantly. But when it worked, it was amazing that you were lit by the wind, and it was a bloody windy house. I kind of totally forgot that until it sort of came back, and then it's clearly where my interest in electric cars, renewable energy, all that stuff, so fully charged has become now a really full-time job. I mean, an exhausting, knackering full-time job. And so everything else has kind of taken a bit of a backseat, including writing, which I do miss, and I'm sort of hoping I can structure that business so that I'm slightly less full-time doing it. But to reach my age and have something to do that keeps me off the streets is an incredible privilege. I mean, it's such a fluke that it worked. But I mean, I was kind of, when I was basically came across electric cars and the engineers that were building them in California in the early noughties when I was doing Scrap Heap, and we'd made Junkyard Wars, American version of Scrap Heap in the States. And it was a big thing that was going on, which I was fascinated by because it didn't make sense really to start with, but then it sort of grew from there. And it took a long time. It wasn't like I didn't kind of go in an electric car and go, okay, this is the answer. It was like 10 years later I went, oh yeah, maybe that electric car thing is something.
Speaking of cars, we wanted to ask if there would be any more Carpool, and also to thank you for the information we've gleaned on it that we've used to base questions on in previous interviews.
Right. Yes. Well, I am hoping to do some more. We want to do a sort of offshoot of, so it would be within the fully charged universe, but we'll do some carpools because it's just a really good way of interviewing people. So there's a few people that we are hoping to be able to interview, but we'll be driving some exotic electric cars. I don't know what, but something along those lines. I certainly would love to. I mean, I got really exhausted doing it. So I think I did something like 120 episodes of Carpool, and that was a passion project because I could do it on my own. I mean, so most of them I did completely on my own. And Aid, the one I did with Aid, was such a joy. I hadn't seen him for so long, and we had a picnic. A tragic picnic on Hampstead Heath, But he was so sweet and he was so lovely. But I mean, that was an amazing experience doing that. So yeah, we certainly would like to do more. I mean, we'll try. I mean, it was probably going to be energy wonks and engineers from Rivian and Tesla and things like that. But hopefully will be interesting.
So how much money does Jerry Seinfeld and James Corden owe you for stealing your idea?
Literally hundreds of millions. I mean, the thing is, I think it's not fair to say that I was the first person to put cameras in a car and film what happened. I think there was some sort of awful quiz show that was shot in a taxi before I did Carpool. But it was sort of, it was really an experiment. So the cameras that I first got were from Scrap Heap. They were second hand. They were really cheap cameras that we used to strap to the machines that the teams made. And they were like a tube of lipstick, but with a wire and then a little box. And so they'd strap the camera to the perfect position to get the shot of whatever it was doing. But they were called suicide cameras because if the machine blew up, fell over, collapsed on top of it, it didn't really matter. And we did smash up quite a few of them. And then so I got 2 slightly battered but functioning cameras and I stuck them in the car. And I drove my son, who would have been then about 13 or 14. I drove him to see his mate where they were going skateboarding. And it's a torrent of expletives that my son does. But what was interesting is that 10 minutes into he was doing it because the cameras were there. So he was just swearing because Dad won't like me swearing. So he was using all, and he was swearing at everything we were going past. So we go past a tree and you go, fucking trees. But why are you upset about trees? Fucking sheep. Shitty stone walls, because we live in the Cotswolds. That's what you see when you drive around. Yeah. Anyway, I could tell from watching it, and that's really what inspired it, was about 10 minutes in, we'd both forgotten. Both of us had forgotten there were cameras. I'd forgotten. And that was then, I mean, I will never release that bit of footage. That's for the family vault. But it's so funny. My son is very, very amusing in it. And, it's the two of us as we would be without cameras. It was just, and me slightly grumpy, having to fucking drive him all that way just so he can go skateboarding, it's like a pain in the arse and it was raining. But then there's another even more revealing one, which is my wife and I driving to London. Same thing where she's angry because I'm faffing about setting the cameras up. She just wants to go. And then she's driving and I'm in the passenger seat and I'm looking at the things and then I'm making sure it's working. Will it last long enough? And is the tech going to work? And she's going, oh, fucking, why do you have to do this? And then I forget and we're going through diaries and it's so revealing of the relationship because I'm suggesting on Tuesday, I'm not doing that. I've told you what I'm doing that day. Just classic. Very uncomfortable viewing. I wouldn't want anyone else to see it. But I mean, that was so, but the clue was, this is a good way of doing this, to interview someone. You're not worried about the bloody cameras because I can't worry about them because I've got to drive, so that was really where that came out of. But it did seem to sort of work. And there's some brilliant people on it. I mean, the other thing is that comes out of those quirks of fate. So I went to, when I got my insurance renewed, it was, I knew, and I talked to someone about it, and their insurance was much. I said, "Why is my insurance so high?" Because it says actor on the form. I'm the shittest actor in the world. And I said, "Really? So are actors really bad drivers?" They went, "No. Actors actually have a really good insurance record for safe driving, but you might give someone famous a lift." And I went, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" And then I went over Griff Rhys-Jones, Jack Dee, Eddie Izzard. Those 3 people I'd given lifts to in the previous year, and I went, "Oh." And I said, would you count them as famous? He said, yes.
At that point, your premium shot up even further.
Yeah. But what I then thought was, fuck it, I'm going to take advantage. If I'm paying all that for that, I'm going to get some proper famous people in my car, make sure I get my money's worth. So that was a kind of major inspiration for that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Very thrifty.
Yes.
Well, talking of, comedians and people you've had in your car, I mean, what comedy are you watching on the TV at the moment that you've been enjoying?
Schitt's Creek. I fucking love Schitt's Creek. I think that's
a lot of people say that one.
Yeah,
we haven't finished it. We savor it. We savor it. My wife and I say we only do 1 episode a night just because I think I think it might get too schmaltzy for my taste soon. It's on the cusp. It has its moments where it gets a little bit heartfelt. But I think the characters are wonderful in it. I do love it.
Have you seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
I haven't seen that enough. So there's quite a lot of things that we often get turned on by our kids. But actually, that sounds wrong. I don't mean it that way. But the one that we went the other way was What We Do in the Shadows. So Matt Berry, I'm a massive fan of Matt Berry anyway. And I just thought that was brilliant. I loved that. And that was one of those things where it's that that reminded me of Red Dwarf. So it's ridiculous, fucking vampires in Brooklyn, and it's always dark, and it's a joke, and they're stupid, and it's like a jokey vampire, and then they really are fucking vampires that can turn into bats. So it has integrity as a sort of horror genre thing, which I thought was genius. When they first went bat and they turned into a bat, they really are vampires. I love that. They really are 700 years old. He's bored and miserable. I mean, Matt Berry can just stand still and do nothing, and I laugh.
Yeah.
I think he's a genius comedian. So I'm hoping they're making more. I think there is talk of it, but also Toast. So I'm a big fan of Toast because of him.
We were going to end by asking you what you're up to at the moment, but it seems like Fully Charged is sort of occupying you 24/7.
It is really. And it is it's because, in a sense, it's partly, the show is a success. We've just had a big live event, which was phenomenal. And I've always been the skeptical one. If no one's going to come, it's going to be awful. It's going to be a disaster. And it wasn't, thank goodness. And it wasn't a super spreader event. It was outside. And we had over 16,000 people turned up over the weekends, which is like mind-boggling. But we had something like 2,500 test drives in different electric cars, and just an incredible array of stuff on display, and amazing talks and panels. So that takes up a huge amount of energy and time. But what's happening in that field is just very exciting. Next year, we will have 3, certainly 2 functioning, but possibly 3 electric aircraft on display at the show.
Oh, wow.
And that's a thing that, like 10 years ago, when I first drove an electric car, I think this is a brave new technology that could change the world. I had no idea. It's pure guesswork, and the fucking batteries will explode, and Jeremy Clarkson will be right, and we'll all throw them away after 2 weeks, and it'll be a huge embarrassment. And thankfully, he's been proved profoundly wrong. But one thing I never even thought about, let alone speculated about, was aircraft. And we've now seen a couple of large electric aircraft, one of which we've had to sign an NDA, so I'm not allowed to talk about it, but it will appear. So I think certainly your generation, you will be able to fly around Europe in electric planes within the next 5 to 10 years. It won't be you may not even know. You'll just go, you'll go to the airport. The one thing that may change is you might go to an airport that is the size of a football pitch, because they don't need a runway, because they go straight up and down. And we're talking big, not like 2-seater drones, big bloody airplanes with 150 people in them. And they will only fly 400 or 500 miles. They wouldn't be able to go across the Atlantic in them. But for between cities, that's going to be a real change in the way we fly. That is extraordinary. And so when we first came across it, it was like little startup companies that had developed a little 1-seater test plane. It's now Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems, Airbus Industries, putting in literally billions of dollars into developing plane. Boeing is spending a fortune, because there's huge economic advantages to having quieter planes. So one of the things that is going to clearly be a thing, and that might be when you're my age, you could get onto a very big aeroplane, say at Heathrow, like an Airbus A380, like a massive transatlantic plane, and it takes off with electric power. So it's really quiet. Ducted fan technology it looks like a jet, but it isn't. So, but once it's up in the air about 10, 15,000 feet, you've depleted the battery to the point of no return. And that's when you fire a tiny, by today's standards, tiny jet engine. And that flies you across the Atlantic. So the fuel use is like 10% of what we use now. It's a really small amount, because once you're that high, pushing the plane along is much easier. It's taking off uses tons of fuel. And the idea being, you go there at 3 a.m. and you can take off, because no one's going to hear it. Right. Once it's over about 1,000 feet, you can't hear it. So it's much, much quieter. So that means they can run airports 24 hours a day and landing. So that's the theory. And that's what I've spoken to aviation engineers. That's what they're hoping to achieve, but they're a long way off that. That's not going to happen in the next even 15 years, I don't think. But in the next 25, that's not impossible to imagine. So, then they would use biofuel, which I hate, but, they might be able to then mitigate some of the use of that thing. But I think I'm doubtful I'll see that, but I think it's very possible you will. But that stuff across the board is so exciting. Really quick fact for your listeners, that in 2010, to construct 1 kilowatt hour of battery pack cost about $1,200 to $1,400, $1,200. And now it's about $110. So that price change is really dramatic. Now, there's a lot of shit going down at the moment, as we know, with gas price and with chip shortages, and there's going to be big hiccups in the next couple of years in that development. But within 18 months, if you were going to buy a car and you go into a showroom, the electric cars will be the cheaper ones. They'll be cheaper than the petrol ones. And by then, the fuel for the petrol ones will be mind-bogglingly expensive, So that is, there's no argument to be made. When I first started making footage shows, there was an argument to make in favor of electric cars. There's no point making an argument. That's what's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And how soon. And it's really the distribution industry. If you study that, which of course I'm a nerd, so I do, how fast that's happened. So, it's when a kind of company in the UK buys a electric van and they have a picture of them taken in front of it, like 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And we're going green with our electric van, and they got one. And then you hear that Amazon have just ordered 150,000 electric vans in the United States. Yeah. And there's a couple of companies here that have ordered in the tens of thousands. So, they're distribution companies, like the delivery people who deliver stuff to your house. Mm-hmm. And we've already, even out here in the sticks, I've had 2 vans now deliver boxes of stuff here, and they're electric vans. And that's going to happen really, really quickly. And the charging infrastructure to maintain that has got to be economically plausible and usable and reliable, because it's companies using it. And if it goes wrong, they're going to kick off. So all the knock-on effects of that will benefit the rest of us, So there, it's an amazing world to be part of, in a sense. We constantly are drowning in, can you come and see this thing? An offshore wind, people in the UK don't know. I mean, it's been shit the last few weeks because it's been still, and the gas price, thanks to Mr. Putin, has gone through the roof. So it's but it's going to get windy again soon. Well, and we've got colossal offshore wind developed already, which we're generally unaware of, but very often 50-60% of the electricity you use in your house is from wind. That does happen. Those days happen regularly.
A setup for Richie and Eddie, a colossal offshore wind, sounds like.
Yes.
Eddie might waft in from
well done for bringing it back to bottom. So I shouldn't have gone. You're absolutely. Oh, I would love it. I would love them to be able to hear someone talking about colossal offshore wind.
Robert, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been
thank you for having me.
It'd be remiss of us not to ask what's going on with Red Dwarf. Are there any specials or anything you can share?
And you had to ruin it at the end.
Yeah. There is that we are all hoping that we can do more. Okay. That I can say that, and I definitely know that. So it's just whether we can all survive long enough to do more. I think it's not impossible. It's not hugely likely, but there's a couple of projects that are stewing away on the back burner that I would love to be able to do. So we can only hope.
Good to hear. That's good to hear. I mean, I've heard Craig's got COVID at the moment.
Yes, I know, and I know he's not well. I've not heard any more detail than there's been on Twitter, but yeah, no, I'm very worried about him. No, he's so tough and he's got through so much, but I do worry, because he has been on about 450 Marlboro Reds a day for the last 50 years,
Quite the listed diet, really, isn't it? Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for having me.
You take care.
Thank you.